Welcome to my mini lesson. If you couldn't tell from the PowerPoint with the little dinosaur here, we're going to be talking about fossils today. So to begin, I'm going to ask you what you know about fossils. And I'm assuming some of your answers would be something like you think of dinosaurs, you think of rocks, you're thinking of something that ages over time, maybe a leaf or a pterodactyl, something like that. So now we'll move on. So I have three pictures here, and what do you think when you see these three fossils? So if I was teaching this to a class, I would ask them and I would assume to get an answer kind of like maybe a dinosaur for this one, or maybe a student would think of the bones or the muscles of the dinosaur. A fish, you can kind of see the tail there and then the fish and like the head right here. Or leaves for the last one, or a plant of some sort. Or even maybe students will think of rocks when they see these three fossils. And then my next slide kind of has what I would think of. So obviously dinosaur, fish, and leaves, because that's what was in the fossil. So now I have an article about what fossils are and how they are made. Some of the verbiage is a little bit tricky. So I would make sure that the third graders would know what sediment is, rock is, all those kind of decomposing, all of what that is before we would read about this, but it's pretty basic still. So, fossilization. A fossil is the preserved remains of traces of a dead organism. The process by which a fossil is formed is called fossilization. It's very rare for living things to become fossilized. Usually after most animals die, their bodies just rot away and nothing is left behind. However, under certain special conditions, a fossil can form. After an animal dies, the soft parts of its body decompose, leaving the hard parts, like the skeleton, behind. This becomes buried by small particles of rock called sediment. As more layers of sediment build up on top, the sediment around the skeleton begins to compact and turn to rock. The bones then start to be dissolved by water seeping through the rock. Minerals in the water replace the bone, leaving a rock replica of the original bone called a fossil. And then we talk a little bit about this. I'd ask if there are any questions, especially since there are some bigger words like rock replica, what is that? And then we talk about how if you look at what the fish was before in the picture before, the rock pretty much took a replica or a copy of what the fish looked like. So we'd go through things like that. And then I would tell the students And then for the next part, I would have the students get out their Play-Doh, and we would talk about how we're making a fossil, kind of like the replica, the rock replica that we talked about earlier. So they would just find 2 or 3 objects around the room, or if they were watching virtually, they'd look for either like a pencil or a spoon, something like that. And then they would just take their object and make it show like on their Play-Doh, and then that would be their fossil. So that would be the Play-Doh activity. And then I would send them over to the Google Classroom with the rest of the lesson. And lastly, I just have my standards. So, yay, that would be the lesson.